Did you know that for centuries, many history books claimed Africa had no history? That it was a blank slate, a continent devoid of civilization until Europeans arrived? This is a lie, a deeply damaging one that has shaped global perceptions and justified centuries of oppression. Today, we are pulling back the curtain to reveal the truth, a vibrant, complex, and powerful African past deliberately erased from the record. The core lie is this, that Africa had no history or civilization worth mentioning before European contact. Figures like the philosopher George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel in the 18th and 19th centuries claimed Africa was no historical part of the world, essentially writing it out of human progress. This idea became a cornerstone of colonial ideology, a justification for the scramble for Africa formalized at the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885. European powers carved up the continent without any African representation, fueled by the belief that they were civilizing a dark continent. The Atlantic slave trade, which forcibly removed an estimated 12.5 million Africans between the 15th and 19th centuries, was also built upon this lie. Dehumanizing people made it easier to justify their enslavement and erase their identities. But the evidence tells a different story, a story of powerful kingdoms, advanced societies, and rich cultural traditions. Let's start with the kingdom of Kush, also known as Nubia, which flourished in what is now Sudan and southern Egypt from around 1070 BC to 350 CE. The Kushites were not just contemporaries of the Egyptians, they ruled Egypt as the 25th dynasty, building their own pyramids and monumental architecture that rivaled their northern neighbors. Next, we have the kingdom of Aksum, in modern-day Ethiopia and Eritrea, which existed from about 100 CE to 940 CE. Aksum adopted Christianity in the 4th century CE under King Izana, becoming one of the first Christian states in the world. They minted their own coins, demonstrating their economic power and sophistication, and rivaled even the Roman and Persian empires. Moving westward, we arrive at the Mali Empire, which reached its zenith under Musa, who ruled from roughly 1312 to 1337. Musa's legendary pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, documented by Arab historians like Al-Umari and Ibn Khaldun, showcased his immense wealth and the sophistication of his empire. The city of Timbuktu, a center of learning within the Mali Empire, housed the Sanko Madrasa, a university that attracted scholars from across the Muslim world. The Songhai Empire, centered on Gao in modern-day Mali, rose to prominence under Askia Muhammad I, who ruled from 1493 to 1528. Timbuktu continued to flourish as a center of scholarship, with libraries holding tens of thousands of manuscripts on subjects ranging from astronomy and medicine to law and theology. Further south, we find Great Zimbabwe, a monumental stone city in modern-day Zimbabwe, built between 1100 and 1450 CE by Shona-speaking peoples. This impressive city controlled trade routes linking the interior of Africa to the Swahili coast, demonstrating advanced engineering and organizational skills. The colonial era doubled down on the historical lie. In 1652, when the Dutch East India Company established a refreshment station at the Cape of Good Hope, the myth that the land was empty before Jan van Riebeeck's arrival was perpetuated. This ignored the fact that indigenous Khoisan peoples had lived there for millennia. In southern Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, British colonial officials even denied Africans built Great Zimbabwe, falsely attributing it to Phoenicians or Arabs. Luckily, archaeologists like David Randall McKeever and Gertrude Cotton Thompson debunked this racist claim in the early 20th century. The apartheid regime in South Africa further institutionalized this lie by promoting a racialized version of history that minimized African agency. The 1953 Bantu Education Act enforced a curriculum that erased African history, aiming to keep black South Africans in a position of subservience. But the truth could not be suppressed forever. Scholars like W.E.B. Du Bois, in his book The World and Africa, argued that Africa had a rich and complex history, distorted by racism. Cheikh Anta Diop, a Senegalese historian and physicist, challenged Eurocentric views of African civilization in his book Nations, Niggers, Et Culture, arguing for the African origins of ancient Egyptian civilization. Chancellor Williams's The Destruction of Black Civilization documented pre-colonial African states and argued that European conquest deliberately dismantled them. Joseph C. Miller's work on the Angolan slave trade revealed the complexity of African societies before and during this horrific period. And contemporary scholars, like Patrick Bond and Patrick Merlette, continue to critique the false narrative surrounding the European arrival in South Africa. There are many lesser-known details that further expose this lie. African states were deeply integrated into global trade networks long before European contact. Swahili city-states like Kilwa, Mombasa, and Sofala traded gold, ivory, and slaves with Arab, Persian, Indian, and later Portuguese merchants from at least the 8th century CE. Timbuktu's manuscript culture was incredibly rich, with an estimated 40,000 to 700,000 manuscripts covering a wide range of subjects, written in Arabic and African languages. An African resistance to slavery and colonialism was widespread and persistent, from the Haitian Revolution to the Zulu resistance under Shaka, the Asante Wars against the British, and the Moji Moji Rebellion in German East Africa. Archaeological and genetic evidence proves the Khoisan peoples inhabited the Cape region for at least 2,000 years before 1652, their rock art, language, and material culture a testament to their long-standing presence. African scholars contributed significantly to world knowledge, especially in Islamic science and philosophy. Ahmad Baba Timbuktu, for example, wrote extensively on law, theology, and ethics in the 16th and 17th centuries. The impact of the historical lie has been profound. It served as the ideological foundation for slavery and colonialism, justifying the enslavement of Africans and the partition of the continent. It caused significant psychological and cultural damage, contributing to internalized racism and a sense of inferiority among Africans and the African diaspora. But the fight for the truth has led to academic transformation, with African history now a legitimate field of study in universities around the world. This exposure of historical lies fueled African nationalist movements, with leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and Nelson Mandela invoking pre-colonial African civilizations to legitimize independence and self-rule. Today, many African countries are revising their school curricula to include pre-colonial history. There is a resurgence of interest in African languages, oral traditions, and traditional knowledge systems. Projects like the Timbuktu Manuscripts Project are preserving and promoting African heritage. The exposure of historical lies has strengthened Pan-African identity, with organizations like the African Union emphasizing African unity and pride in African history. However, the legacy of slavery and colonialism continues to shape debates on reparations, economic development, and political stability in Africa. The fight for historical truth is not just about correcting the record, it's about empowering future generations and building a more just world.